Hey guys, welcome to Smooth Brain Plays, and today we're going to talk about the partner pairs Zellix Sanity Flare and Haunted One. It's an interesting duo that are sure to bring chaos and intrigue into your commander game. Let's jump right into it. So the theme of this deck is mill, mill, and mill. You're going to be milling out yourself, you're going to be milling out your opponents, and you're going to be using resources from your graveyard better than anyone else on the battlefield. Well, let's get into the main commander of this deck, which is Zellix Sanity Flare. He's 2 and a blue, and he has Hive Mind. Whenever a player mills one or more creature cards, you create a 1/1 black horror creature token. And then he has pay 1 and tap him. Target player mills 3 cards, choose a background, obviously which is Haunted One. So we're going to get into disrupting opponent's strategy and filling their graveyard to kill them. And we're going to be utilizing Zellix's main ability, which is Hive Mind, to create plenty of horrors and using those horrors to attack, tap for mana, and do other crazy things. So first off, we'll start with Psychic Corrosion, which is 2 and a blue, an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Now this is a big stacks piece in this deck, and as soon as you play it, you will become an enemy. But it disrupts opponents' library so much that it's, pretty reasonable for why you're going to be the enemy. And then we'll start with Memory Erosion, which is even worse. 1 blue enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. This is a big stacks piece, especially for those Spellslinger decks. They have to find an answer for this card before they can go off. And then we have Douthie Voidwalker. He is black, he has Shadow, and if a card we put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. And then he has tap, sacrifice Douthie Voidwalker, choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it. When you may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. So this is a stacks piece, and I mainly put it in the deck just for other graveyard decks, because you're going to be milling a lot of cards into their graveyard, and if they have a way to recur things out faster than you do, then they are going to go off. And that's the one problem with this deck, is you can feed other graveyard decks. So we have pieces like this that will stop that. Then we'll talk about Mind Grind, which is X blue and black sorcery. Each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals X land cards. Then put all cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard. X can't be 0, which again is just another card to fill up those graveyards as fast as you possibly can. You can play out of them, you can stop them from doing other stuff. Then we have Maddening Cacophony, which is 1 blue, has Kicker 3 blue, and it's a sorcery. Each opponent mills 8 cards. If this spell was kicked, instead each opponent mills half their library rounded up. Again, just like Mind Grind, filling up those graveyards as fast as you possibly can. Then we have Teresian Mindbreaker, who's 7 generic mana, which almost will never be cast for that. He has an Unearth ability, which is 1 blue, and whenever Teresian Mindbreaker attacks, not does damage, attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded up. This is a big swing that not only has 6/4 for its damage and defense, but it can mill an entire half of someone's library in an instant. Alright, let's talk about some synergies for Zellix. So to start, we'll start with Deranged Assistant, who's 1 blue, creature human wizard, and you can tap him to mill a card and add a generic. He's a 1/1, but his main thing in this deck is tapping for mana and activating Zellix. So not only are you gaining mana, but you're also hopefully milling some of your creatures to create more horrors and fill your graveyard at the same time. Then we have Shadowkin, which is 3 blue, creature shapeshifter with flash, which is pretty good with some of these other commanders that are out here. And at the beginning of your upkeep, each player mills 3 cards. You may exile a creature card from among the cards milled this way. If you do, Shadowkin becomes a copy of that card, except it has this ability. So this card is really again about triggering Zellix, and not only are you going to be milling yourself, but 3 other opponents. So you will most likely get at least 2 triggers for Zellix, and it happens every upkeep for your turn. So it's a big card in this deck. And then next is Captain Narthrod. Narthrod? Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. So he's 3 blue-black, legendary creature, horror pirate. And horrors you control have menace, which your commander is a horror, so easier to swing out, and all the rest of the tokens you create. Whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. Again, filling up graveyards, getting more triggers on your commander. And then at the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn. Put it onto the battlefield under your control. Not only does he have this ability, gives you menace, and then when you deal damage with horrors, which is a lot of this deck, you're going to be milling out opponents, you're going to be putting things in their graveyard, pulling things out, and just this continuous cycle of dealing damage, creating horrors. And not only does he mill, all your horrors mill, and there's tons of ways to mill out your opponents per turn, and you can just take those things, the best things in their deck. Then we have Drown in Dreams, which is X2 in blue. It's an instant, and then has choose one. If you control a commander, as you cast this spell, you may choose both. Target player draws X cards, and target player mills twice X cards. Again, perfect way for you to draw to get some more steam, and to mill someone else out. Then we'll talk about Imperious Mindbreaker, which is 1 blue creature human wizard, and he has Soul Bond. So you may pair this creature with another unpaired creature when either enters the battlefield. They remain paired for as long as you control both of them. As long as Imperious Mindbreaker is paired with another creature, each of those creatures has, whenever this creature attacks, each opponent mills those cards equal to its toughness, and he's a 1/4. So even if just he attacks, you're milling 4 cards out of someone's library and triggering your commander, hopefully once, and then you can connect it to one of your bigger beaters too, and mill out for 10 with some of these cards. Mill an opponent 10 cards, trigger your commander one more time to get another horror for the next turn. Not only is it a blocker, but later on you'll be able to use it to tap for mana. Perfect card for this deck. Then we have Altar of the Brood, which everyone knew was coming. It's a 1 generic artifact. Whenever another permanent enters a battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So again, when your commander triggers, that's another permanent entering the battlefield, which will make each of your opponents mill a card. Then, hopefully one of those triggers happens again, you'll make another horror, and everyone will mill again. So it's not an infinite combo, but it's near infinite. It's as close as you can get without going infinite. It's very dependent upon what your opponents have in their library that mill into their graveyard. But even still, you're going to have plenty of ways to continue to mill them, create horrors, and have this trigger again and again and again. Then we have Mesmeric Orb, which is just another Altar of the Brood, even better though. It's 2 generic artifact. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So on each of their upkeeps, they're going to mill tons for every land, every creature that they attacked with the prior turn, they mill a card. And this card is separate than some of these other mill cards because each permanent that they untap is a separate trigger for your commander. So they won't only just mill 10 and you get 1 horror out of it. They're going to mill 10, and if they mill 10 creatures, you're getting 10 horrors. And if you have Mesmeric Orb and Altar of the Brood out, you're going to get 10 more mills. It's just going to go completely bonkers with this deck. Next, let's talk about what we do after we fill our opponent's graveyards up. Let's talk about some graveyard payoffs. So we'll start off with Psionic Ritual, which is 4 blue sorcery that has Replicate. Tap an untapped horror you control. When you cast a spell, copy it for each time you paid its Replicate cost. You may choose new targets for the copies. Exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Psionic Ritual. So the entire game you've been milling out your opponents, creating horrors, filling up their graveyards, and now it's time to use their spells against them. You cast this spell, you have 5 horrors out, you're going to get the best cards from everyone's graveyard and cast them and have this massive play and hopefully take out some of the players. It is a big spell. You're cheating tons of mana out because you're paying 6 mana and you're going to spend 15, 20 mana from their graveyards and playing some big splashy spells, doing tons of damage, doing tons of things, drawing tons of cards. On anything you can think of, you're doing it this turn. Then we'll talk about Guilt Feeder. He's 3 black creature horror. He has Fear. This creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures, which I know black is more popular now. It's very popular color, but it does matter. It does happen a lot. This card does not get blocked. There's tons of decks out there that don't run any black, don't run any artifacts, and this is a perfectly unblockable creature when it needs to be. And then he has, whenever Guilt Feeder attacks and isn't blocked, defending player loses 1 life for each card in their graveyard, which is, I mean, I've seen it do 50 damage to somebody. This card is sneaky good. It is 5 mana, a bit on the higher side, but if you mill it into your graveyard and you cast it, oof, people will be frightened. Then we'll talk about Eldritch Pact. It's 6 and a black. Sorcery. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard. So this card has 2 purposes. If you need to draw an answer, you'll cast Eldritch Pact, and obviously you'll know how many cards you have in your graveyard so you don't kill yourself. And you can try to draw and see if you can find an answer. It is a lot of mana, it's pricey to do, but if you're in a pinch, you can use it. But the main reason this card is in the deck is to kill an opponent out just randomly out of nowhere. You're filling up their graveyards and then you're saying, hey, you know what? You have 50 cards in your graveyard. I want you to draw 50 cards and lose 50 life. Perfect way to, if you're on a one-on-one battle and you just can't find that way to attack with combat, this is a perfect sneaky attack that no one sees coming. Next card is Dreadhound. 4 black creature demon dog. When Dreadhound enters a battlefield, mill 3 cards. Whenever a creature dies or a creature is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is just basically a copy of Sir Conrad I have in the deck, and it is perfect for milling people out, making them take damage, and just, you know, destroying decks, destroying life totals, and it's a 6/6 blocker. So it is a perfect card for this deck. And then last but not least, Shieldred, which is a 3 black legendary creature, Phyrexian horror, has menace, and when Shieldred enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. And then on the backside, you can pay 4 and a black, exile Shieldred, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery, and if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. So we'll talk about the front side first. So it's a nice way, to destroy a creature, get it off the battlefield, just let them, choose something off their battlefield and put it in their graveyard. But don't worry, that's not why this card is in this deck. We'll talk about the backside next. Alright, let's talk about the backside of Shieldred. So once you pay that 4 in the black, you'll flip over Shieldred and it'll turn into the True Scriptures. It's a saga, and the first saga is for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Then 2, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards, which obviously really good hand destruction, filling up those graveyards with more and more targets and milling more cards to trigger your commander. Then the last but not least, which is the most important part of this card, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, exile the True Scriptures, then return it to the battlefield. So not only are you bringing everything back from everyone's graveyard, having this massive turn, but you get to flip Shieldred back over. Do it again if you need to, which I highly doubt you will need to. Alright, next, Sir Conrad the Grim. You guys knew it was all coming. 3 black legendary creature human knight. When another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. He has 1 in a black, each opponent mills a card. He's a 5/4. So obviously you're milling out opponents, you're going to be filling up those graveyards, and you're going to be triggering Sir Conrad a ton. If this sticks on the battlefield, you will do so much damage so fast, and you can just feed into him by paying 1 in a black, milling cards, triggering your commander, bringing out more horrors. He's going to be so deadly, and the fact that he doesn't have to tap, you can do this on anyone's turn. If you have extra mana you've been holding up and you didn't need to use it, just throw it into Sir Conrad, mill people out, do more damage, bring out more horrors. He's perfect for this deck. Then one of my favorites in this deck, Undead Alchemist. 3 in a blue, creature zombie. If a zombie you control would deal combat damage to a player, instead that player mills that many cards. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from their library, exile that card and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And he's a 4/2. Some people may not think he fits in this deck, but with Undead Alchemist out and having Altar of the Brood out, that's another permanent that's getting put into the graveyard. Then you're going to take it out, make a 2/2 zombie. That permanent's going onto the battlefield. It's going to trigger Altar of the Brood, and it's going to happen again. Everyone's going to mill a card, and then hopefully get another trigger, making another zombie, and you're going to be triggering Zellix if he's out too. So not only are you going to have 1 trigger for Undead Alchemist, you're going to have another trigger for the other horror coming out. Everyone's going to be milling cards. It's, again, almost the closest thing you can get to an infinite combo without it being an infinite combo. There's so many threats here. Everyone's going to have to deal with you. It's a hungry deck, but this card in particular, just goes by everyone's notice, and it's just trigger. And not only do you get those permanents on the battlefield, you get all these zombies, but you also have this card that does a 4/2 that can mill people out. The zombies that you get from this card are very useful, very deadly. You can mill out tons and tons of cards from players' grave or libraries so fast. Trigger Altar of the Brood, deadly combo. So let's talk about the interaction and protection for this deck. So the main reason why we chose our partner pair for the background Haunted one is to protect our commander and our horrors that are on the battlefield. So Haunted one is 2 in a black legendary enchantment background, and it has commander creatures you own have when this creature becomes tapped, it and other creatures you control that share your creature type with it each get +2/+0, gain Undying until end of turn. So Undying is if the creature would die, it returns to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter if it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it. So this card is a little clunky with your commander because they're both the same mana value, but it just offers so much protection for this deck, so much protection for the other cards in it, and your commander taps so easily just by paying 1. It is a very good card in this deck. It protects you from board wipes, destruction from other cards. And all of your other horrors get +2/+0 and Undying. You're gonna swing out with this massive army of horrors that everyone thought were 1/1s, and they're gonna turn into these big beefy creatures. So next card, Lightning Greaves. 2 generic artifact equipment. Equip creature has haste and shroud and equip 0. So not only if you have this on the battlefield, you can give your commander haste and shroud, but it's a good way to protect your commander. Talk about some of the interaction. Negate. It's a 1 blue instant, counter target non-creature spell. Drown in the Lock, which is blue-black instant, choose one, counter target spell with mana value less than or equal to the number of cards in controller's graveyard, destroy target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of cards in controller's graveyard. So it is limited by the amount of cards in your opponent's graveyards, but it comes in very, very clutch. When you do fill up those graveyards and they have stuff in there and they cast something big, it's a very cheap spell to counter and it has a lot of different ways it can be used. You can use it to destroy creatures, you can use it to counter spells. Very good card. And then we have Misdirection, which is a 3 blue instant, and then you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay Misdirection's cost. Change the target of target spell with a single target. Very good card. Isn't too expensive, it's budget. Not bad for this deck. It's a pretty nice, nifty trick you can pull on someone. Let's talk about some more interaction with Curtain's Call, Slaughter Pact, Feed the Swarm, and Dismember. Just other ways to destroy creatures. Curtain's Call is nice because you're never going to pay 6. You're going to pay, 1 less, 2 less, 3 less, depending on the amount of opponents you have. And destroying 3 creatures for 3 mana, ooh, perfect. Feed the Swarm. Another way to get rid of creatures and enchantments, Dismember, and just paying 1 and 4 life, giving a creature -5, getting around indestructible. Slaughter Pact, just another nifty trick in case someone thinks you have 0 mana. You can cast this for nothing and then destroy a creature and then just pay 3 on your upkeep. Perfect card for this deck. So lastly, let's talk about combos for the win. So the first one and the biggest one is Mindcrank with Duskmantle Guildmage. So Mindcrank is a 2 generic artifact with whenever opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. Duskmantle Guildmage is blue-black creature human wizard with 1 blue-black. Whenever a creature is put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere this turn, that player loses 1 life. And as 2 blue-black, target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and it's a 2/2. So the second ability on Duskmantle doesn't matter as much as the first ability. Yes, it's good if you can't get them to put cards into their graveyard, but there's so many ways to do this into this deck that you're never going to need it. So what you want to do is either tap your commander, use a card to have everyone mill 1 card into their graveyard, then Mindcrank will trigger, and then they'll lose a life from Mindcrank, lose a life with Duskmantle, milling, losing life, milling, losing life. So either they lose all their life or they'll mill out, whichever comes first. Perfect combo for this deck. Super mana efficient, super powerful. And then I have one extra combo in this deck that I wanted to bring up. So it's very cheap, efficient, and again, one of those ways that not an infinite combo, but it's very close, very cheap for you to do. No one expects it. So you have Thieves Guild Enforcer for black, creature human rogue, flash. When Thieves Guild Enforcer or another rogue enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 2 cards. As long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, Thieves Guild Enforcer gets +2/+1 and has Death Touch. It's a 1/1. Combined with Maskwood Nexus, which is 4 generic artifact, creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And then it has pay 3, tap it, create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So with Guild Enforcer out and Maskwood Nexus, every time your commander creates a horror, you're also making a rogue, which triggers your Guild Enforcer. Each opponent mills 2 cards. If they mill another creature card, that is going to trigger your commander again, making another rogue that's come onto the battlefield, milling more cards, getting more horrors / rogues out. And then if you run out of steam just by doing that combo, you can also tap your Maskwood Nexus and make another rogue that triggers again. So if you don't get to milling out your opponents, you're going to get very close disrupt their decks completely, and if they don't have a way to bring things back, that is the end for them. Alright guys, we're at the end of the video here. Let's talk about how the deck plays. So Zellix and Haunted One are a very good combo. It's a bit slow because you don't have ramp, you're in blue and black, so you're going to be biding your time, you're going to be waiting, interacting with pieces you need to stop them from going off, but you're just going to be biding your time, milling slowly, building up your army, protecting what you got, and getting those pieces ready to do tons of damage, milling tons of cards, and hopefully milling out all of your opponents. A very disruptive deck, obviously, with all the milling. There's going to be lots of decks that can't pull back out of the graveyard. You're going to have tons of ways to stop them from doing what they want to do. No one really thinks about it, but you're going to be milling out so many cards. You're going to be stopping them from getting a lot of their combo pieces, a lot of the creatures, a lot of the interaction that they need, and you're going to be getting big things out of their graveyard. Very interactive. I tried to keep out as many counter spells as I could, but there are some cheap spells in there that'll stop people from doing what they need to do. But a lot of it too is you're going to be interacting with what pieces come on the battlefield. You're going to have ways to destroy enchantments, counter spells, destroy creatures. You're going to be stopping them left and right on all the turns. Sneaky. It's a very, very sneaky deck. People don't know the combo. They don't know Zellix on Haunted One. They know it's a mill deck, yes, but they don't know what the angle is. They know there's some cards like Sir Conrad, they're going to be in there, but Sir Conrad honestly isn't what you need. You just need to mill them out. That's it. There are a couple cards in there. If you get Mind Crank out, you're still doing a lot. You're still doing a lot of damage. You're going to be getting out a ton of cards from their graveyard. They're just not going to know what angle to attack from. And it's very resilient. With Haunted One out, it is perfect protecting your commander, protecting your board. If you have Maskwood Nexus out with Haunted One and Zellix, you're going to make all of your creatures horrors, and then you'll be bringing them out, protecting your commander. If you have Intruder Alarm out there and another way to build up mana with a creature, you can untap Zellix every time you tap it and mill people out and then just gaining mana. There's tons and tons of ways to protect this deck, and I've never felt like I was stuck in a game because I couldn't cast Zellix, because if I don't want to pay all of that mana to cast your commander, then you just throw him in your graveyard. There's tons of recursion, tons of ways to bring him back, and you don't need him either. There's tons of other ways that you mill people out. Zellix is good, yes, but you don't need him. You don't need him on the battlefield to win games. So guys, that's the end of the video here. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let me know what I can do better. Let me know what you guys would like to see. I'm planning on doing a video and highlight of me playing the deck. That'll be coming soon if I get a lot of interaction on this video. Like I said again, like and subscribe. All right, have a good day.